So as you know, I love to go to church and everything. And as we all know, the church needs a little bit of help. So I decided that as I go to church, I want to be like something like a reviewer. You know, like when you go out to eat. And you just got to go out there and just see what they got on the menu. Well, today I got a little bit of some molded food there at the church. Oh, I know. So we're going about the session. This is no diss to the church unless they feel like it needs to be dissed. But there's three main things that I like to point out about a church and what they miss out on. So the first thing would be, they were talking about how, you know, just coming to Jesus, your life is better, your sins are forgiven because he died for you. They don't go into depth. That's the problem with it. It's easy to say Jesus will forgive you, but it's harder for them to remind you that there was a guy on the left and on the right side of Jesus when he died. And that's something that they had to remind everybody. That's one thing. And they talk about the truth all the time. Oh, the truth is, the truth will set you free, the truth and everything. They don't speak about the truth. They think by going around the truth, they avoided the truth. But by not speaking about it, you're pretty much doing a cover-up. You see, there was one on the left and one on the right of Jesus. One of them laughed at Jesus. Let's just say he didn't go into an eternity in heaven. Then you had another one on his side. One that asked for forgiveness. Didn't even want to look at God because he didn't feel worthy enough. God said, that is the reason why you will ascend with me. The other one was mocking Jesus, and a crow poked out his eye. They forget to remind you that even though you think that you're a believer, that nothing could happen to you, well, look at his 12 disciples. All of them followers of God. Each of them died. How many were resurrected? You see, just because you follow God does not mean that you cannot die a painful, excruciating death or not reach into heaven. Let's look at Moses. Moses didn't reach the promised land. What do you think that is? As hard of a believer in God that he was, he had one problem. His problem was, well, he started to believe that he was God. And that's why he didn't reach the promised lands like Abraham did. Instead, he died in the deserts. And then you start to look at when a church says, well, you know, we're supposed to only be helpers. We're not destroyers, this and that. We're not supposed to hurt people. Well, look at David. He killed Goliath. You didn't play patty cake with him and say, hey, that's it. Okay, game's over. Let's go. Everybody, let's go home. No, he took down the biggest problem. He took it down with force. He didn't do it the Martin Luther way. He did it the Malcolm X way. Put it in his own hands and he took him out. Look at Samson. Redemption story. Samson brought down the entire government. Well, not all of them, but the king and his people, his main people, dropping some pillars that he was chained to. Killed him. He didn't just say, well, just let him go and I'll stop thrusting around. No, he killed him. And then they start talking about other things like, well, being sexually immoral won't get you into heaven. Drunkards won't go into heaven, and all this, etc., etc. Sexual immortality is doing anything sexually immoral or immoral. Child rape, rape in general, obtaining sex in an immoral way, pretty much. That's sexual immortality. Child rape, rape in general, and anything that is immorally correct sexually. They don't talk about that. They talk about the truth from what they say. They talk about, oh, well, if you're LGBTQ, you're wrong. Or LGBTQ plus. It's actually LGBTQ cross, because it ends with the cross. Okay? Though everything that they do and everything that they're fighting for, it ends at the cross. Let me hit you with some stats. Did you know most of the people that are LGBTQ cross, most of them were people that were raped when they were young, grew up, lost all sense of identity. It wasn't until the government decided to infiltrate them like they always do everything and try to ruin shit. They found out that a large portion of the LGBTQ plus or the LGBTQ cross were actually those kids affected. So what did they do? They infiltrated it, made it look so horrible that nobody would believe what they had to say anyways. The extremists. Yes, the ones that say time to snip off those private parts of kids and everything that affects kids. That was the whole thing. CIA, FBI, they all infiltrated that shit. Made it for what it is now. To make it look like a horrible thing. Not realizing that those kids out there are the ones that were raped and molested and all that. And they're living a life that isn't theirs anymore because of their innocence being taken away. They don't talk about stuff like that in church now, do they? And they know these stats. Some churches are trying to make up for it because they don't want to be sued. They don't want to look bad in a business negotiational way. And so they look even worse if they can't talk about the truth and what it is. They'll talk about how you're dressed inside a church real fast. But they don't talk about the government, about how thousands of kids are going missing. Because most people, you know, that's where they get most of their income, whether their spouse does it or not. That's the only reason why they don't bring it up, because they're comfortable with the money. So they're no better than the spouse that actually does the dirty work. So when you look at it for what it is, yes, you got to remember that a church needs to include all evils of the earth. If you're saying that somebody dressed slutty, but your eyes can't get off of them, I think you're the one that has the problem, not them. If you can't talk about in a church about the government missing thousands of kids at the border, you can't talk about the government selling these kids for profit, or Hollywood molesting these kids through contracts. If you can't talk about that kind of shit, don't talk about how a woman dresses. Don't worry about how the woman dresses. Every church wants to talk about abortion's this, abortion's that. You want to know the main reason why women don't want to have kids? It's because men can't even take care of the fucking kids that are alive today. You can't even stop them from being raped. Instead, they're partaking in parties like that for the extra bonus or the extra bank. So then when you look at it like that and you can't really tell the difference, I mean, come on. You know what it is. That's something that churches need to talk about. Second problem. Churches will claim that they got God on their side, but they can't talk about stuff like that out of fear for man. They know that the government sits inside of their little stands, and so they don't talk about stuff like this. Their fear of man is shown. They're not supposed to be leaders at that point. They're not supposed to be in a church. They're just not supposed to if they can't have the faith to talk about such big topics, knowing that there are people out there that probably want them dead after they do it. So their fear in man shows that they're not really with God if they cannot talk about such things. Those are things that need to be talked about. If they cared about the truth, they would teach you the correct way to pray. Instead of going around it and using these babbling words like pagans and start saying, God, well, give me this, do this, be there for them. You have to do God's prayer. Matthew 6-9. You start to do his prayer, maybe things might change. You won't be giving out so much molded food. And then we got to get into all the other stuff. Like I said, the sugar coating is not very good at all. Sugarcoat everything like, oh, nothing's going to happen to you. Don't worry about it. Woohoo! It's a party out here. Do whatever you want. You sound just like Little Nicky. Just like the movie, and you're probably that guy, Adrian. Oh, nothing's going to happen. Don't worry about it. Ah! You got to talk about everything. Talk about how the 2/3 of the church don't make it to heaven. And you know why? Because of pastors like you. Because of pastors like you that hold back the information and try to make everything seem like it's all fun and games, but you know that it's not. Well, obviously, you don't care. Or you just don't know about the real heaven and hell, and you're just profiting off of the church. Because if you really cared about God and everything else, you would talk about such things instead of going around it out of fear of man. But you also got to think about everything else. The third thing, and the third problem that I see with a lot of churches, is the hypocrisy. The hypocrisy of saying all these things, but not living the light themselves. How many churches give 10% to another church after they're done? Just because you're the church doesn't mean that it ends with you. You're not God. You didn't receive that 10%. He said give 10%, right? 10% of your time, 10% of your money, or 10% of whatever. And I don't think as a church that's just enough, you know? That's just my opinion. Especially as everything else, it's always good to give up that time. Whatever it be, that 10%. Hypocrisy can also fall into other brackets like how I said, fear of man instead of fear of God. Not talking about the right things. Oh, what if the government shuts me down? Oh, what if the government tries to kill me? Oh, what if this and that? You're already dead. And you just locked yourself further away from heaven, so what does it matter? Talking about such things just might be able to open up the doors for you and keep you nice, well, and protected, and show you what happens with faith. Now imagine if you all were to start normalizing talking about sexual immortality, about child rape and all the other such things, and people started coming up comfortable. You know why churches don't talk about sexual immortality and you don't hear about child rape and child molestation and all that? It's because they know people will come forward. And that ruins business. If you saw churches filled with people talking about their testimonies about how they've been raped, who it was and all that, you know what kind of change would happen in the world? The greatest. You know why they don't talk about it? Because they know what could happen. Either that or they're just more afraid of man than God himself. That's the hypocrisy that I'm talking about. And if they would do things morally correct by the Bible, as they say, the world would be a different place if churches learn how to fix their stuff. This is just my honest review from what I'm seeing. I don't know how you feel about it, but that's how I feel. And every Sunday, I'm going to hit you with a new review. So stay tuned, because love and peace is all we eat. Yum.